verses 12 through 15. David, the poet king, shines while describing his suffering as the king in verses 12 through 15. He does what he does best. David was a musician. David was a poet. David was a shepherd. David was a warrior. David was the monarch. He had a lot on his CV, my friends, a lot of experience. And when we think of Psalms, we often think of just prayer and song and ignore the fact that it is Hebrew poetry. It's not Shakespearean sonnets and couplets that rhyme. It's not that kind of stuff. It's Hebrew poetry. There's a lot of parallelisms in here. And I love the fact that here we are in the month of April, and we're studying a chapter of Hebrew poetry, and April is National Poetry Month here in the United States. It all comes together, it seems like. When David is talking in very poetical forms in verses 12 through 15, he talks about his enemies. As a king, he has enemies all around him. He has foreign nations who are threatening to invading, and on the defense. He's the warrior king. He's at war his entire reign, it seems like. He's surrounded by physical, national enemies. He's a monarch. And so he's surrounded by domestic, political enemies. We did not invent political chaos. It goes with any kind of human government. So David is talking about his political enemies as well. The priesthood never seemed to get along with the monarchy. In the midst of the priesthood and the monarchy, you also had prophets rising up, speaking both good things to the king and bad things to the king. David had his fair share of enemies, and he uses animals to describe them. David had family enemies. Even before David became king, he married the daughter of Saul, the current king of Israel. And Saul, his father-in-law, went on a campaign to murder him. You think you've got family problems. I mean, imagine being in the same room with your father-in-law, having a social visit in public, and he throws a spear at you to kill you and pin you against the wall. Now, if that happens to me, I don't stay for dessert. I don't care what it is. Cheesecake with bacon bits on it, I'm fleeing. David had enemies, and he used animals to describe these enemies. Later on, when David's an old king, his immediate family, his children, his sons, his daughters, his family falls apart. I mean, we're talking soap opera. Drama queen on top of drama queen mixed in with Mean Girls. This would be headlines on all kinds of rag newspapers. He had one son rape a daughter. He had one son kill another son. He had a son rise up in rebellion to try to remove David from the throne. David was a man who was surrounded by enemies in every sphere of his life. And he describes these enemies as bulls and lions. Chicago Bulls, Detroit Lions. I hope I got those right. I'm not good at sports. I don't follow baseball at all. He describes the bulls of Bashan. The bulls of Bashan are expressions of wealth. They're wild bulls. I don't have much experience with wild bulls. I do have loose in the parking lot, not realizing that that gas station is surrounded by 1,000 bald eagles who are hungry. I have lived in grizzly bear country where the bears around us outnumbered the people, and public school was canceled because there were too many bears in town. And you would think the most dangerous animal in that environment would be the bear. That more people would be killed by grizzly bears than anything else in Alaska. And that would in fact be wrong. The most dangerous animal in Alaska was the moose. It's pretty much just a big deer. But the big deer killed and wounded more people than any other animal. In fact, all the other animals combined did not equal the amount of death, harm, and destruction done by horses or cows. Moose. If you hit a moose, not even if you hit. So I get the fact that David, the shepherd from the country, who's used to looking after his sheep under the dark skies of the night, trying to protect them in the wild. I get how he would describe his enemies as bulls. And I get how he would use lions as an example. Because the lions prowl around to destroy. Not only would a lion kill the shepherd boy, but the lion would also kill the sheep. And it's the shepherd boy's job to protect the sheep from the lion. And David has experience at doing that. He gained confidence in fighting enemies. My mic is going dead? Okay. You want to swap it out, or you want me to just keep talking? Technical difficulties with my phone. Nope. That's it. And remind me what I was talking about. Up so long, better. Yeah, now I got questions. I can talk for 3 hours. We're good to go. I can connect. And this may require a technical work on my bill. Okay. Am I good? Woo! This is CNN. Oh. That was my James Earl Jones impression. Sorry. Okay. Now we're playing with it really good. Fine and dandy. I pushed all my buttons. I'm going to talk like it's working. All right. Good deal. Now, what was I talking about? You guys were, lions. Yeah, lions. I get how David was on the field doing his job, and he was watching the sheep, and he had to defend the sheep against lions, so he killed lions. He killed lions as a pre-teenager. So when it came time to him go taking food to his older brothers at the battlefield, and he hears the giant Goliath mocking Israel, he's like, well, God protected me against lions, God will protect me against the Goliath. And so he takes a rock up against a sword and a spear and a shield and an armor and wins. So naturally, when David is thinking about enemies, foreign, domestic, family, political, he would use lions in a poetry form. That makes sense to me. And David gets very personal in the midst of this. Did you notice his words he used to describe himself in dealing with the suffering of being surrounded by bulls and lions? He says that he is drained, that he is broken. His heart is melted. He's dried up. He feels like he's dying. You can't be on high alert on that adrenaline rush looking out for danger everywhere because you're surrounded by danger everywhere for very long. Eventually, the adrenaline wears off and you're wiped out. And David does a good job of describing that feeling of being wiped out in a poetic form. This psalm is about David. He's writing about his experience, but it's also about Jesus. We don't often think of Jesus hanging on the cross, surrounded by bulls and lions. We don't think about how he was up all night being tortured. He had been whipped and beaten. And so Jesus on the cross is drained like David, is broken like David, is melted like David, is dried up like David, and dying like David. And my friends, if you've ever suffered, you've been there too. And it feels like it goes on forever and ever and will never end. But it will. But it will. All right, we looked at verses 12 through 15 and the poetry of it all. Now let's look at verses 16 through 18.